Betty stared at yet another mistake on her typed page. She worked as a secretary at Texas Bank and Trust. It was the early 1950s. At that time, her position as executive secretary was the highest job open to a woman in that industry. She guessed she should be grateful. She had suffered so many failures already in her young life. She was divorced and she was alone raising her young son. All she had was a high school education. Her only real skill was typing, and that was riddled with mistake after mistake. As it was, her employee file was filled with enough reprimands for typing errors. She knew that her only real value lay in her typing accuracy. She also knew how difficult it was to correct errors caused by typing on these new electric typewriters. Betty just could not afford another reprimand that might result in losing this job. She simply had nowhere else to go. She had to feed her son. She had to feed herself. Then Betty had a thought. Over the Christmas holidays, she used some of her other talents to paint holiday windows at the bank. When she made mistakes lettering the windows, she could cover those errors with a tempera water-based paint in a bottle. So why not do the same things on the documents that she typed? Without sharing her ideas, Betty conferred with her son, Michael's chemistry teacher, on how to thin out her paint to use at work on her documents. And for the next 5 years, Betty used this liquid that she called Paint Out to use to make corrections on her documents at work. As her coworkers learned of her invention, they would ask Betty to borrow it. And then as her bosses saw that Betty's documents would be flawless as she used this liquid, they began to approve her liquid. Renaming her fluid Mistake Out in the 1960s, Betty eventually left the bank. She opened operations in her home and eventually hired over 200 employees as she sold her liquid. When Gillette Corporation learned of Betty's invention, in 1979, they offered her $47.5 million for it. Today, over 25 million bottles of liquid paper are sold to the public. Betty Claire McMurray only lived to be 56 years old, but she did a magnificent job writing the end of her story. When she died in 1980, she left her only son, Michael Nesmith, a member of the famed musical group The Monkees, $50 million of an estate valued at over $100 million. Now, Betty used the stumbling blocks of her mistakes as stepping stones for her success. This is Sandra from Team Awesome at Wilson's Professional Training Services, leaving you with this question. How will you write the end of your story?